Hi. This week we're going to finish up our discussion of formal logic by moving into another branch of logic known as categorical logic. Now, when we were doing the propositional logic before the exam, we were dealing with logic that involved operators and statements. So when we were trying to figure out whether or not an argument was valid or not, we were considering the relationship among statements. So for instance, we were considering something like if the weather is poor, then we will stay indoors. Obviously, to return back to what we were discussing before the exam, this whole portion here and this portion here, so the weather is poor and we will stay indoors, are considered propositions or statements. They're describing a state of affairs. Now, propositional logic is helpful in this regard. However, if you're dealing with if you're just dealing with terms, rather. So, for instance, if you're just dealing with terms like cats, games, people, etc., these are not statements. They are merely just terms, or in this sense we would consider them classes of things. So people can be or individuals, I should say, can be members of these terms, of these classes. Now, so propositional logic is helpful in determining the validity of arguments that are dealing with statements, but it won't help us for arguments like the following. All cats are mammals. All mammals are warm-blooded. Therefore, all cats, are warm-blooded. Because we're simply dealing with terms or classes of things, so cats, and in this case mammals and warm-blooded animals, that's animals is implied here. Because these are not actual statements or descriptions of state of affairs, they're just like classes of things, we need a different kind of logic in order to deal with arguments that take this sort of form here. So that's why we have categorical logic here. Right. So with categorical logic, we are determining and analyzing the relationship among classes of things, essentially, here. So in this video, we're going to just talk about the sort of basics of a categorical statement here. Next week, we will actually get into the argument analysis of categorical arguments. Okay. All right. So let's set out a few definitions here. In every categorical statement here, you have several parts. The first and most important part to mention is that there's always a subject term and a predicate term. So in the statement here that we have, our example, all cats are warm-blooded, we would say that cats would be our subject term in this case, because it's the subject that we're referring to, and warm-blooded, and by the way, we'll talk about this later on in the module, but technically we need to put in the fact that we're referring to warm-blooded animals. Animals is of course implied here, right? But when we're talking about predicate terms, we're referring not just to what would this essentially be, like a modifier, an adjective, but we're referring to a class of actual things. All right, so not just the modifiers, but the subjects, or excuse me, the terms that go with the modifiers. Right. So subject and predicate term. Every categorical statement will involve a subject and predicate term. Now, in addition to the subject and predicate terms, we also have quantifiers within every categorical statement. So in this case here, the word all is functioning as a quantifier. Quantifiers will be anything like all, some, no. Anything that's telling you the number of things in a particular class, right? So in this case, it's all. Now, what's important to note is that the all is being drawn together with the subject here, in this case, cats. Okay. The final portion, part of a categorical statement, is what we refer to as the copula, which is any sort of, it's Latin basically for any verb form of to be. So in this case here, we have the word are, which is a version of the verb to be, and so therefore this is functioning as our copula. Right. Now, this particular statement is in what we refer to as standard form. It's in standard form specifically if we go ahead and we add animals here. So you'll see this later on in the modules, but standard form means that 1, you have the quantifier out front, 2, you have a clear subject and predicate term, and those subject and predicate terms are not just adjectives or in other words modifiers, but they also include some sort of noun, right? So it has to be an actual class of things, class of cats, class of warm-blooded animals. It has to be in that form, and in standard form, you have to, the verb that's in play has to be the copula. It has to be a version of the verb to be. So we'll see this later on when we will translate ordinary language into standard form of categorical statements. But there are categorical statements that are not initially written with the copula, right? So you have to actually reword it or rephrase the entire statement to put it into standard form. But this will come later on in the module.